The knock came at 6:12 a.m. Not polite, not patient. The kind of knock that announces itself like a demand before any words are spoken. I opened the door to find Karen Holloway standing ankle-deep in snow, her parka zipped halfway up despite the bitter cold, clipboard already extended like a weapon she'd been waiting to draw. Steam rose from her breath in sharp, aggressive puffs. "We need your snowblower," she said. No greeting, no question mark anywhere in her tone. Behind her, my driveway was clean. I'd cleared it the night before when the first flurries started, knowing what was coming. The rest of the neighborhood looked buried under 2 feet of white, driveways invisible, cars transformed into shapeless mounds. The silence of a world muffled by winter pressed against everything. "That's mine," I replied, keeping my voice even. Karen smiled tightly, the expression of someone who had practiced authority in bathroom mirrors. "It was purchased while living in the community. That makes it a community asset during emergencies." I blinked, genuinely confused. "That's not a thing." Her smile vanished like frost under a blowtorch. Brad showed up 20 minutes later with a pickup truck, engine idling clouds of exhaust into the frozen morning air. He climbed out slowly, reluctantly, avoiding eye contact the way people do when they know they're on the wrong side of something but don't have the spine to say so. "HOA directive," he muttered, studying his boots. "We're pooling resources." I stood in the garage doorway, the snowblower humming softly behind me, fresh fuel, warm engine, ready to work. For me, not for anyone who thought they could simply take it. "You want to borrow it?" I asked, keeping my tone reasonable. "Put it in writing. Terms, duration, liability, then we can talk." Karen stepped forward, boots crunching against the packed snow on my driveway. The sound was aggressive, territorial, like she was staking a claim on ground that wasn't hers. "You don't get to set conditions," she said. I glanced at the thermometer mounted on my garage wall. 14 degrees below zero. The kind of cold that punishes stupidity with frostbite. The kind of cold that doesn't care about clipboards or authority or whatever imaginary power Karen thought she wielded. "You're not taking my equipment," I said calmly. Karen crossed her arms, her breath coming faster now, condensation forming on her eyelashes. "We'll wait." That was her mistake. 15 minutes passed, then 30. Snow drifted sideways in the wind, accumulating in small ridges against Karen's boots. The cold was patient in a way she wasn't. Brad stomped his feet constantly, his face growing redder by the minute, though whether from cold or embarrassment I couldn't tell. Karen kept pacing, furious, dialing her phone again and again, but whoever she was trying to reach wasn't answering at 6-something in the morning during a blizzard. I stood just inside the garage, space heater humming warmth against my back, hands wrapped around a fresh mug of coffee. Linda appeared beside me, her voice low. "You sure about this?" I nodded, watching Karen's increasingly frantic movements. "She said community emergency. Let's see how committed she is to that story." Karen's voice cracked as she shouted through the open garage door, desperation bleeding through the authority she was trying to project. "You're obstructing HOA operations." "I asked for it in writing. That's not obstruction, that's documentation." Brad's teeth were chattering now, his whole body shaking. He kept glancing at his truck, at the warmth waiting inside, but Karen's presence held him hostage to her failing power play. Then Karen made her move. She marched toward the snowblower and tried to start it herself, grabbing the pull cord with red-knuckled determination. She yanked. Nothing. She yanked again, harder, throwing her whole body into it. Still nothing. Because I had quietly pulled the ignition key 10 minutes earlier, slipped it into my pocket while she was busy pacing and shouting. Karen's gloves came off. Her hands were already red, the first stages of real cold damage setting in. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Karen," Brad said weakly, "maybe we should—" "Shut up!" she snapped. Finally, she dialed 911. I heard her through the wind, her voice strained and desperate, trying to sound official. Yes, an uncooperative resident, refusing to surrender equipment. Yes, it's a snow emergency. We need assistance. Officer Jensen arrived 20 minutes later, his patrol car struggling through the unplowed streets. He climbed out slowly, took in the scene, Karen trembling with cold and fury, Brad looking like he wanted to disappear into a snowbank, me standing comfortable and warm in my own garage. He listened to Karen's complaint, his face professionally neutral, looked at the snowblower, looked at Karen, then at me. Is this your property? Yes. Did you agree to lend it? No. He turned back to Karen and I saw something shift in his expression. Not quite amusement, but close. Then this is a civil matter, he said. Actually, no, it's not even that. Ma'am, there's no law requiring residents to lend personal property during a snow event. You're freezing because you chose to stand here. Karen stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. Her lips were pale now, trembling, but her eyes still burned with humiliation and rage. She glared at me with the kind of hatred that promises consequences. "You'll regret this," she said. I set my mug down on the workbench and spoke clearly, slowly, making sure every word landed. You will apologize, in writing, to me and to the HOA for attempting to seize private property without legal authority. Brad whispered something to Karen, probably trying to convince her to cut her losses. Officer Jensen raised an eyebrow, waiting. "Ma'am," he said finally, "I strongly suggest you leave." Karen hesitated, the wind howling around us, snow swirling in vicious eddies. For a moment, I thought she might dig in deeper, might push this confrontation past the point of any reasonable return. But even Karen Holloway had limits. She turned and stormed off toward Brad's truck, empty-handed, her boots punching angry holes in the snow. Brad followed like a kicked dog. I shut the garage door and stood in the sudden warmth, the quiet. That's when Linda's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, eyebrows rising. HOA emergency meeting, 8 a.m., mandatory attendance requested. I checked the time, less than 2 hours away. Karen thought this was about a snowblower. She had no idea what freezing someone out of their own authority really looked like. The email hit everyone's inbox at 8:03 a.m. All caps, full Karen. Resident Michael Turner refused to provide essential equipment during a community emergency. This behavior threatens the safety and cooperation of our neighborhood. She CC'd every household in the subdivision, blind copied the board, attached her own account of events like it was a legal filing. But she forgot one crucial thing. She put the entire demand in writing. Linda printed the email, that slow smile spreading across her face. "Congratulations," she said. She just documented her own attempted seizure, in her own words, sent to the entire community. I spent the morning reading, not emails, bylaws, the actual HOA governing documents, the ones filed with the county, not the imaginary rules Karen invented when convenient. Mr. Alvarez knocked at noon, snow still clinging to his coat. He was in his 70s, quiet, the kind of man who had seen enough to know when something mattered. I was on the board once, 8 years ago. I remember what the actual rules say. He handed me a marked-up copy of the bylaws, highlighted passages, marginal notes, and neat handwriting, his signature at the bottom of a cover statement. "There's nothing in here about taking private equipment," he said. "Nothing about mandatory resource pooling. Nothing that gives the president that kind of power." Karen had invented a rule, and now that invention was documented, witnessed, and ready to be challenged. She came back that afternoon, this time with 2 other board members, their expressions uncertain, uncomfortable conscripts in Karen's war. She didn't step into the garage this time, stayed on the driveway, maintaining distance, like she'd learned something from the morning's humiliation. "I'm issuing fines," she said through clenched teeth. "Failure to support community safety during an emergency." I held up my phone, the screen showing Officer Jensen's contact information. He already confirmed this isn't enforceable. You want me to call him back? Karen laughed, the sound brittle and unhinged. Let's see what the county says. She stayed outside too long again, making calls, leaving messages, trying to find someone, anyone who would validate her authority. The wind didn't care about her title. The cold didn't care about her clipboard. The county called her back the next day, on speaker so her husband could witness it, so the neighbors could hear. The official's voice was flat, bureaucratic, utterly indifferent to Karen's wounded ego. You cannot compel residents to surrender private property that's not within HOA authority, and continuing to threaten fines for legally protected behavior could constitute harassment. Silence filled the room. I suggest you consult an attorney before taking any further action, the official added. Do you have any other questions? Karen ended the call without responding. No apology, no acknowledgement, just fury, simmering and dangerous, looking for a new outlet. Mr. Alvarez wrote his witness statement that evening. Clear language, calm tone, devastating content. I observed HOA President Karen Holloway attempt to seize private equipment and remain on the resident's property despite clear refusal. I further observed Officer Jensen advise her to leave. Her behavior appeared to exceed any reasonable interpretation of HOA authority. He signed it, had it notarized at the bank the next morning. 2 other neighbors followed with their own accounts. Karen's authority was cracking, and everyone could hear it. The apology email arrived just before midnight. Subject line, apology. Body text, minimal. I acknowledge my actions may have exceeded HOA authority and apologize for any misunderstanding regarding the incident. Linda printed it, framed it, hung it in the kitchen like a trophy. But I wasn't done yet, because apologies without consequences are just words, and winter wasn't over. The HOA meeting room was packed. People came in boots and heavy coats, snow still dusted on their shoulders, drawn by the drama that had been circulating through the neighborhood for days. Karen opened the meeting late, her voice missing her usual sharp edge. Something had changed. The room could feel it. We'll begin with... A hand went up, then another, then 5 more. I stood, keeping my voice calm and measured. Before we proceed with any other business, I'd like the apology email entered into the official meeting minutes, for the record. The room went silent. Karen's eyes locked on mine, searching for weakness, finding none. She had no choice. The email existed. Witnesses had seen it. Denying it would only make things worse. Brad tried to help her, his voice weak and unconvincing. That email was informal. It wasn't meant for official documentation. Mr. Alvarez stood slowly, his age lending weight to his words. Then so was the demand to seize his property. If informal communications don't count, then neither does the original threat. He placed the notarized statements on the table. 3 pages, 3 signatures, 3 neighbors who had watched Karen's overreach and decided enough was enough. Karen stared at the documents like they were written in a language she didn't understand. Officer Jensen wasn't there in person, but his written incident summary was. The board secretary read it aloud, her voice steady and neutral. No legal authority observed for HOA demand. Resident fully compliant with all applicable laws. HOA president advised to disengage. Situation resolved without enforcement action. Hands raised. The vote wasn't close. 7-2. Karen's gavel hit the table too hard, the sound desperate rather than authoritative. She had lost control of the room, and everyone knew it. The bylaws came out, not the imaginary ones Karen had been citing, the real ones, filed with the county, legally binding. The secretary found the relevant section, highlighted in yellow by someone who had done their homework. Pending investigation, the president may be temporarily relieved of duties by majority board vote. Karen's face flushed red, then drained to white. She stood slowly, gathering her papers with shaking hands, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "You'll all regret this." No one responded. No one needed to. Snow fell softly that evening, gentle and quiet, nothing like the angry blizzard of days before. I cleared my driveway alone, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The physical work felt good, honest, real. Across the street, Karen's house was dark. No clipboard, no authority, just winter pressing against her windows like everyone else's. The snowblower roared once, steady and reliable, then settled into its familiar rhythm. When I finished, I shut it off and listened to the quiet. The neighborhood felt different, lighter. Power, I realized, only works if people believe in it. And tonight, no one believed in hers anymore. The review didn't drag on the way these things usually do. There was too much paper, too many witnesses, too many people who had finally found the courage to speak up once they realized they weren't alone. Emails documented everything, the original demand, the threats, the fines that were never legally valid, the apology that admitted wrongdoing while trying to minimize it. The witness statements sat in a neat stack, notarized and signed, each one another nail in the coffin of Karen's authority. The board met without Karen present for the first time in years. The room felt different, calmer somehow. People actually spoke. Ideas were exchanged rather than dictated. Someone laughed at a small joke, and the sound seemed to startle everyone, like they'd forgotten laughter was allowed in these meetings. Facts don't argue, they simply exist, waiting to be acknowledged. And finally, the board was ready to acknowledge them. The findings report ran 3 pages long, clear language, no drama, no hedging or diplomatic softening of the truth. The president exceeded HOA authority in demanding surrender of private property. Attempted coercion documented through multiple witness statements and official police report. Misrepresentation of bylaws to justify unauthorized action. Continued harassment after being advised by law enforcement to disengage. The final line mattered most, the one that would follow Karen through whatever came next. Loss of confidence confirmed by majority board assessment. Karen's name appeared throughout the document, but it was no longer followed by a title. She was just a resident now, just another homeowner in a neighborhood that had finally remembered it didn't need a dictator. The vote was scheduled for Saturday morning, early enough that people could attend before weekend errands, late enough that the sunrise had warmed the air above freezing for the first time in weeks. Karen showed up anyway, even though she'd been asked to stay home. No clipboard this time, no gavel, no entourage of reluctant supporters, just a coat pulled tight against a cold that had nothing to do with the weather, and eyes scanning the room for allies who weren't there. She sat in the back row, arms crossed, watching as the board worked through the procedural requirements. Motion to remove. Second, discussion period, though no one had anything left to discuss. The evidence spoke for itself. The vote was unanimous, 9-0. Even the members who had supported Karen in the past, who had enabled her overreach through silence and compliance, raised their hands against her. Self-preservation as a way of clarifying loyalties.
Karen stood up once, mouth opening like she was going to speak, going to make one final argument, one last desperate plea for the power she'd abused. Then she sat back down. The room waited in silence as she gathered her purse, her coat, the fragments of dignity she was trying to hold together. She walked out without a word, the door closing softly behind her, anticlimactic after all the drama she'd created. Winter didn't forgive her, neither did the room, neither did the neighborhood that had spent years under her thumb, afraid to push back, afraid to question, afraid of the consequences she might invent. The new board moved quickly, perhaps overcorrecting for years of dysfunction, perhaps just eager to establish that things had truly changed. They passed one amendment immediately, before the meeting even officially adjourned. Small, specific, permanent. The HOA may not compel use, borrowing, or seizure of private property under any circumstance, including declared emergencies. Voluntary resource sharing is encouraged, but never mandatory. Someone suggested calling it the Turner Clause. I tried to wave them off, uncomfortable with the attention, but the name stuck anyway. It appeared in the revised bylaws, a permanent reminder of what happened and why it could never happen again. I didn't ask for that. I hadn't set out to change anything, just to protect what was mine from someone who thought authority meant taking whatever she wanted. But I didn't refuse the honor either. Sometimes standing your ground creates ground for others to stand on too. Spring came slowly that year, reluctant and hesitant, like the neighborhood itself was learning to trust warmth again. Snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass that gradually remembered how to be green. Kids appeared on sidewalks, riding bikes, drawing chalk murals, filling the air with sounds that had been muffled all winter. The emergency emails stopped. No more all-caps demands, no more invented crises designed to justify control. The new board communicated when necessary and stayed quiet when it wasn't, a revolutionary concept after years of Karen's constant surveillance. She listed her house in late April. No farewell message to the neighborhood she dominated for so long, no apology tour or attempt at reconciliation. Just a realtor's sign in the yard and an empty driveway where her car used to sit, engine running, while she watched the street for violations. The house sold quickly. The new family had 2 kids and a golden retriever. They waved when they saw neighbors. They didn't own a clipboard. The final snowfall came late that year, a surprise storm in early April that dropped 6 inches overnight and caught everyone off guard. I woke to white silence and the familiar weight of responsibility. I cleared my driveway first, the snowblower running smooth and strong, the machine that had started everything performing exactly as it was designed to. Then I crossed the street to Mr. Alvarez's house, because he was 74 and his back wasn't what it used to be, and because he'd stood up for me when it mattered. Then one more neighbor's driveway, then another. Not because anyone demanded it, not because some invented rule required it, because I chose to, freely, the way community is supposed to work. Coffee appeared when I finished, thermoses and mugs, handed over with gratitude and small talk and the easy warmth of people who had learned to trust each other again. We stood in driveways and talked about nothing important, weather, sports, the new family's dog, and it felt like something had healed.
That's the difference. That's what Karen never understood and couldn't have understood even if she'd tried. Community isn't built on demands. It's built on offers, on choices, on the willingness to help that only exists when people are free to say no. The snowblower sits clean in my garage now, serviced and ready for next winter. The key hangs on a hook by the door, right where I can find it. The fuel tank is full, the engine is maintained. It's mine, completely and entirely mine. And because it's mine, I can choose to share it whenever I want, with whoever I want, for whatever reason makes sense to me. Karen thought authority meant taking. She thought power meant control, meant forcing compliance, meant standing in the cold demanding surrender until her fingers went numb and her lips turned blue. She thought the title on her business cards gave her rights over other people's property, other people's choices, other people's lives. She learned too late that none of that was true. Real community only works when people offer what they have, when generosity is voluntary and gratitude is genuine. The moment you start demanding, the moment you start seizing, the moment you convince yourself that your position entitles you to other people's things, that's the moment you stop building community and start building resentment. Winter doesn't care who you think you are. The cold treats everyone equally, strips away pretense and title and self-importance, reduces everything to basic survival and basic choices. You can stand in someone's driveway demanding their snowblower, or you can ask nicely and accept whatever answer you receive. Karen made her choice. The neighborhood made theirs. And the people who finally stopped listening, they discovered something important in that frozen standoff, something that had been buried under years of compliance and fear and the path of least resistance. They discovered that authority only exists when it's granted, that power only works when it's accepted, that a clipboard and a title and a loud voice mean nothing when people finally decide to say no. The HOA still exists, meetings still happen, dues still get collected and spent on landscaping and snow removal and the shared spaces that make a neighborhood function. But something fundamental shifted that winter, a rebalancing of power that nobody talks about explicitly, but everyone understands. We're neighbors now, not subjects, not resources to be pooled and managed and controlled, just people who chose to live near each other, who help when we can, who respect what belongs to others, and who remember what happens when someone forgets the difference between leadership and tyranny. The snowblower starts on the first pull every time. I maintain it carefully, keep it ready, treat it with the respect that good tools deserve. And every winter, when the snow falls heavy and the neighborhood goes quiet, I clear my driveway first. Then I choose who else to help. That's the difference between what Karen wanted and what community actually means. And it makes all the difference in the world.